webinar, which I will do now. Okay, so this webinar is being recorded. If you'd like to view the webinar or any of the additional resources associated with it later, we will be posting it to our YouTube channel and our website. So stay tuned for those, as well as all of the other webinars that are part of this series. So like I said, my name is Haley Graff. I'm the resource conservationist with the Flathead Conservation District. And I am joined here tonight by my fellow coworker, Samantha Tappenbeck. She's our conservation program manager, and she will be helping me out behind the scenes as well. And then our presenter tonight is Allie Uwelling, joining us from DNRC, the Department of Natural Resource and Conservation. All right, I'd like to go over a couple of housekeeping items with everybody to start off. By default, all attendees, your video is turned off and your microphone is muted. We can change that as we get into our discussion and our question and answer session at the end of the presentation. The presentation will be about 45 minutes and we'll try to allow at least 15 minutes for question and answer. At that time, we'll have the opportunity to make this a little bit more interactive. If you are having any connectivity issues, try disconnecting and then reconnecting with that same link. Sometimes all it takes is a quick restart to get you going again. As we go through the presentation, we may mention some resources, some websites, things like that. We will post some of those in the Q&A box or the chat box for you to click on during the presentation. But we'll also make sure to include all of those additional resources on our website once it's posted a few days after today. Okay, this webinar is being recorded. Let's see, go through my notes. Oh, if you have any questions during the presentation, like I mentioned, we'll do a Q&A session after Allie's done presenting. So go ahead and type your questions into the Q&A box below. The Q&A box should be at the bottom of your screen and it looks like two little speech bubbles. So type that in there and then we will either type in the answer to your question right away, or if it's something that we feel Allie might want to expand on a little bit and answer more in depth, we'll notify you that we want to answer your question live, and we'll cover that at the end during question and answer session. You also have a little option to raise your hand. Should be down there in the participants window. Should look like a little raise hand icon. If you click that, we will see it in our participants window behind the scenes, and we'll know that you have a question or you want to voice something. So you can go ahead and do that. And again, when we get to the Q&A session, we will unmute you and give you the ability to talk directly. When we get to the end of the webinar and you close out, you will be automatically directed to a survey. We really encourage you to take that survey, please. We use the responses from participants to help make our webinars better each time and to get a better understanding of what you learned or what information you might still need. So we're constantly looking at those and trying to improve what we're offering. Okay, and with that, our land stewardship webinar topic this evening is wildfire preparedness, like I mentioned, and I'll let you take it away, Allie.
Okay. So I will find my share screen button. Yes. How's that? Good. Can you hear me?
Yep, we're not quite seeing it yet, Allie.
Oh, really? Oh, hit the share button. There we go. That must be better.
Okay, we got you now.
Okay. Thank you. As Healy said, my name is Allie Allwelling, Forestry Assistant Specialist and Fire Information for the Department of Natural Resources and Conservation here in Kalispell, sort of bridging forestry and fire within the DNRC. And I want to just take a minute to thank everybody, understanding it is 50 to 55 degrees, it is sunny, and it is St. Patty's Day. So for those of you who are attending this evening, thank you so much. So we're gonna get started. Living with wildfire. You may have come hoping for a really short list of things that I can do to prepare for wildfire season. And we'll get there, but it's really hard for me to present anything without a little bit of background. So topics, we're gonna cover the whole concept of fire adapted communities, fire and forest ecology here in Northwest Montana. Trust me, this is just a minute apiece. Ignition resistant construction concepts within the home ignition zone, some forest health and fuels reduction. So if you sat in and listened to Rick Moore talking about forest pests and disease last week, that's a little bit of that. Some cost share programs, grant funding programs that are available to help get some of this work done. And then in the event that there is a wildfire, some emergency planning, evacuation, and then again, just sharing sort of local resources that are available right here. So that's a quick rundown of the evening. But honestly, last night as I was this kind of stuff keeps me awake. And I was thinking about wildfire preparedness, like what does that mean anyway? What does it mean? So I started thinking, what is it? I think that being prepared means building awareness. I think we've got a lot of people who have lived here a long time and a lot of people who are moving into Northwest Montana. So building this awareness of the place where you're moving, the forests, the shrubs, the grasslands where we choose to build and live and play. Awareness of the seasonal conditions. Fire season here in Northwest Montana is usually July through September. Really, it's just a few months. Honestly, sometimes it's a couple of weeks. But depending on where that ignition hits, it could be, your worst day. So it's really, it really depends. And then awareness of the actions that we as individuals and communities can choose to take. And I say we because I know even the panelists here, we live in that wildland-urban interface. So we're all making choices and making decisions on what we do to prepare for that fire season. And then again, just to thank everybody for making time to be here this evening. I encourage people to think of this as the beginning of a conversation. And I always say I look forward to getting your phone call, to getting your email, to having you follow up and say, oh yeah, we talked really fast. We covered a lot of topics, but I want to know a little bit more about this. Because like Haley said, this is not a deep dive. This is probably, hopefully pretty quick, pretty fast paced, and we're gonna touch on a bunch of topics. So one of those is this whole concept of fire adapted communities. So there's this whole wheel, and fire adapted communities is at the center. And I think, can you see my little cursor here? No, here, can you see it over here? Okay. So fire adapted communities, and you probably showed up tonight thinking, this is what I want to know about. I want to know what I can do right here around my home and my property in this zone, which is great because we are going to cover that. But I also want to ask a few questions. If you live here in the Flathead Valley or anywhere really, what jurisdiction do you live in? Do you know your fire chief? Do you know the true response capacity of the volunteer fire departments that we have here, the extremely dedicated partners that we have here for response? Do you know what is going on around you with the adjacent forest lands, whether it's timber sales, fuels reduction, prescribed fire? Because a lot of that is this work on landscape treatments, fuel breaks, prescribed fire, thinning. Those guys, and I said, those folks who are working within those, on those projects are great, very responsive. If you've got questions about what they're doing, go ahead and give them a call. Give them some support because there's a lot of really good landscape skill work going on out there. Here, community engagement. We have what we call neighborhood ambassadors, people who are spark plugs, people who are interested, people who want to get neighbors together, who recognize the benefits of working as a community, as a neighborhood, as a drainage, as a cluster of homes, the benefit of increasing the work, not just our own properties, but my 3 acres plus your 3 acres plus your 2 acres, and how we can work together. So fire adapted communities consist of informed and prepared citizens planning, taking action to safely coexist with wildland fire. And if you've ever been up the North Fork, this is a great example of the community that has been affected by large fire, and they are doing the work. They are making it happen. They're doing the fuels reduction, hosting the workshops, engaging with one another in effort to create this fire adapted community concept. So I want you to just recognize, like, yes, this defensible space, this home hardening conversation is really important, but it's really just part. It's just part of the conversation. So again, I look forward to getting your phone call and continuing this. Because I'm also part of a local group we call Fire Safe Flathead. So these are individuals, neighborhoods, businesses, wildfire professionals with the Forest Service, the DNRC, the county, the rural departments, the Glacier National Park, all working together to create fire adapted communities in the Flathead. So if you've got questions, you want to follow up, we meet monthly. We have since 2016, and we're available to give presentations to communities, to provide support, to anything that you want to get started. Because we, as firefighters, as professionals, believe that optimism is good, but hoping something bad doesn't happen is not nearly as good as planning for it to happen and then being surprised when it doesn't, right? Firefighters don't rely on optimism. They rely on planning, awareness, training, and being prepared. So I assume that that's why you're here. And I wish that I could see your faces. I wish that I could see who is here, because I know I've got some friends who are engineers, who are spreadsheet, who are list makers, who are here because they are planners and they want to be prepared. And I always love it when I can sort of call on them. All right, so we were going to talk briefly about awareness of the conditions, the place where we live here in Northwest Montana, fire and forest ecology. Again, this is 3 bullet points, that's it. But recognizing that it is an integral component of the ecosystems where we choose to live. It is required for species diversity, for health, renewal, restoration. And without fire, these fire-dependent coniferous forests where we choose to live and play can become unhealthy. So when you drive up the North Fork and you see that lodgepole pine forest growing, that was affected, that was burned. I forget the fire and I forget the year, but those are fire scars on the landscape. Lodgepole pine has very clear adaptations for fire, along with the ponderosa pine, the lodgepole pine, the Douglas fir forests that we choose to live in. I think it's sort of funny, actually, that we choose to clear our home site. Often that merchantable timber might go to our local mill, be milled into building material that we then take and erect our structure, right? Like, we are taking fire dependent forest and we are just reconfiguring, manipulating, and then building, and then being somewhat surprised when it burns. And I just think it's funny. I did the same thing. So this is just an illustration of fire in the crown of the continent. So if people move up here and they're like, it's pretty wet in Northwest Montana, it never burns. I think people used to say that about Glacier. Glacier never burns. Well, okay, so we look at Glacier National Park. This is the border with Canada here. The bright green is Glacier. The darker green is the Flathead National Forest. This kind of brown is the crown of the continent boundary. And all of these gold blotches on here are fire scars between the years of 1980 and 2017. So I thought this was a pretty good illustration for anybody who thinks we don't actually get fires. Well, we do. We may not get fires like California. We may not get fires like some other states, but there will always be a fire season here. Again, it could be 3 months, it could be 2 weeks, but just being prepared for fire season is a good idea. And what do we have? Again, we've got more of us moving into what we call the wildland-urban interface, where the wildland and the wildland vegetation and urban is the structures where they meet. There was also something just like the natural role of fire. Yes, it is important, but so is the role of the volunteer fire departments, the DNRC, the Forest Service, everybody who's out there putting out fires. We're doing it for a reason, right? So yes, we recognize the natural role of fire, but we also recognize the importance of protecting life and property. So there is a reason why suppression resources are dedicated to putting out fires. So yeah, let's talk about fire. I forget what grade it was, but we learned about the fire triangle. We need oxygen. And in a wildland setting, that's obviously just a little bit of wind. We need fuel. And in a wildland setting, that can be grass, shrubs, trees. It can be a structure. And we need heat. So what is our source? What is our source of heat? Well, I need to just insert this prevention message at this moment because heat is ignition. And how do most of our wildfires start? Honestly, 60 to 80% of wildfires are caused by human activity. It's debris burning season right now. A lot of people are out there lighting fires, burning. Good ventilation days for burning, that might mean a high wind day because it's going to blow the smoke out of the valley. So having the right tools on hand when you're burning, great idea, because that's how a lot of our wildfires start. That is the top cause of wildfires right here in the Flathead Valley. Dragging trailer chains in the summertime. You see those sparks flying off and igniting cured grasses in the ditches. Unattended campfires, hot vehicles driving through dry grass. So these are the sources of ignition, in addition to lightning, obviously. But yeah, human-caused fires are expensive and they're preventable. So again, we're talking about our ignition source. This is something that we can do something about. There's my prevention hat. And then we have this ignition, and what determines how that ignition, what happens with the fire behavior. So right now, yeah, you could have dragging trailer chains and it's not going to do anything at all. That's a different situation in late August. So fire behavior analysts, firefighters are always looking at the fuels, the weather, and the topography. So when we look at fuels, we are looking at fuel moisture. We're looking at, is it wet? Is it dry? We're looking at continuity across the landscape horizontally, right? Cured dry grasses, a field of dried grass in late August. And we're looking at, so horizontal and then vertical continuity. So ladder fuels, fuels that allow a fire to move up from the ground or the surface into the crowns. We're looking at weather. Is it hot and dry? Is it cold and wet? How often are we getting moisture throughout the summer season? That can really dampen fire behavior, just some high humidity and a little bit of rain. Winds, temperature, humidity for the most part. And then topography. So where do we build? Do we build on ridge lines? Do we build mid-slope? Where do we build our structure? So that's looking at aspect. Southern aspects get a lot more sun, a lot drier. The steepness of the slope. Fire likes to move uphill much faster than it does on flat ground, especially when paired with wind. Do we have features that funnel the winds and the fire? So then we're looking at the way that those three things interplay. And that's how we determine fire behavior, extreme fire behavior, right? Continuous dry fuels, hot, dry, windy conditions, steep slopes, canyons, chutes. So this is what we look at when we're looking at fire behavior and what to expect. So the similarity between the two triangles we just talked about is fuels. A lot of what we talk about moving forward is our ability to manipulate and modify and reduce the fuels. So forest fuels. Sometimes we go out and we chat with folks and they're like, when you say tree crowns or crown spacing, what does that mean? That's like the longest branches of the trees and the distance between them. So you can see these trees are kind of close together. So when we talk about increasing crown spacing, we're going to remove a few of the trees, increase the space between the crowns. Ladder fuels, again, those fuels that allow a surface fire to move up from the surface, from the ground into the trees. So again, When we talk about removing ladder fuels, that's what we're doing. We're just sort of selectively removing the vegetation that would allow that fire to move into the crowns. How do fires spread? A lot of times we think we see these big, big walls of fire moving across the landscape. True, that does happen. But a lot of fires also spread with this wind that's generated, the heat, a lot of energy. You can see this column is twisting. It's sucking up pine cones and branches, and it is tossing those embers up to a mile ahead of the fire. And it is starting spot fires in what we call receptive fuels, fuels that are dry, fuels where if you throw an ember on, or if an ember makes contact with that patch of needles or leaves or whatever is on the ground, it starts a new fire. And when you have lots of new fires starting together, that's what we're up against. Or you have structures out ahead of this fire, and you have leaves and needles in the gutters, or you've got wood mulch around the perimeter. And so those embers and firebrands land in those places, and that is what often causes home ignition, like this. So I was not able to get the video going on this, but the left is a video. The Insurance Institute of Business and Home Safety has a turntable, this big hangar where they build structures of different materials, and they have an ember generator where they shovel mulch, and it just throws and blows embers at these structures. You can see they've got needles up on the roof. They've got different siding, different windows, different mulch, different landscaping, different roof construction, vents with different size screening. And a lot of the research and a lot of what we're going to talk about in a little bit is coming out of this research. And what they're doing is they're replicating what natural situations look like, which is the situation on the right. So that is a wildfire. That is what it looks like. Those are embers skittering across the asphalt being generated by fires. And you can see where the embers blow and accumulate in the same place as leaves, needles, snow does in the snowstorms. Embers accumulate, and that is what has the potential to ignite a home. Sometimes it's not the flaming front. So we've had the good fortune to have this guy, Jack Cohen, physical fire science researcher, retired from the Fire Sciences Lab down in Missoula. This is the lab. If you're ever down in Missoula, they've got great facility. You can take tours. It's near the smoke jumper base in the airport. If you're into fire, like some of us are, it's a great time. But this is where a lot of that research happens, in the laboratory setting. So he has taken that back in the 90s. He did a lot of crown fire research. You can see there are fire shelters down here, shelter material, sensors, instruments, cameras, Nomex, right? Like firefighting clothes, positioned in different locations, along with some wooden structures that were set up 30 feet, 50 feet, 100 feet away. So some of the distances that we talk about later come from Jack Cohen's research in the lab with the crown fire research. And then he has done a lot of post-fire investigations. So he's really interested in how come this home burned down, but yet this vegetation is still green and standing. What is happening here? Why are the homes igniting, but the vegetation is still green? Like this. This is another one of those pictures where the home was ignited by embers, even though the trees and the vegetation is still green. And all of this led to this years ago, but it's this home ignition zone concept that we keep coming back to. And at the center of the home ignition zone is an ignition resistant structure. So the red, that 5-foot zone, that is a non-combustible perimeter. So those embers that we just saw swirling around, they can swirl around because ignition resistant construction concepts are used. Embers land on the ground. They don't ignite anything because there's no wood mulch. There are no juniper trees adjacent to that home. There's nothing there to ignite that would then ignite the structure. 30 feet out from that is relatively short grass. Ideally, it's irrigated. There, again, crown spacing is wide. There are not a lot of conifers. And we call out conifers specifically because that's what we have a lot of. And because when you take branches and throw them on a fire, you hear this, right? You hear the volatile oils in those needles bursting and burning and tossing little embers, and you see entire needles glow and land outside of your fire ring, right? So that's why we're talking about the crown spacing and maybe replacing some of that. Maybe plant a maple, plant a broadleaf, right? Like a leafy green tree to keep the shade, keep the aesthetics, but they are less volatile, less flammable. And then we here often have a little bit of space. We have quarter acre, an acre, a couple acres, 50 acres, depending on your lifestyle and your budget. You know, there are all kinds of things that you can do because we've got a little bit of space here. We've got that 30 feet. We've got that 100 feet. We might have that 200 feet where we can do some really thoughtful management around our home. Oh, and I put this yellow box up there because I didn't want to forget. So wildfire risk assessments is something that the DNRC does, and Ernie Nace is a firefighter here on the Kalispell unit. He's now the community preparedness specialist. That's his phone number. Or Lincoln Shute. He's the fire service area. He's our fire warden for Flathead County. And these guys are both willing to come out and do a wildfire risk assessment. They'll just do a walk around with you. That's something we can do. We can do that. We can do that. We'll figure that out. So we talked about embers, right? Embers blowing ahead, landing on, here we go. We've got mulch. What happens? It sits and smolders, comes in contact with your wooden attachment, your deck here, starts on fire. We've got needles and leaves in a gutter, again, starts on fire. We've got shake shingles, not a great idea anyway, and we don't see many of those, but illustrating leaves and needles that accumulate on roof systems. That is another place where it's a large surface area. It's where leaves and needles accumulate, and it's also where embers are bound to land. And then one of our local, Rick Trembath, this is one of his photos, I dug out of the archives. Again, spot fire right here adjacent to a structure. This is how things get started, right? It's the little things. So when we're doing a home assessment, it's going to take an hour because we're going to look around and we're going to look at the little things. We're going to look at those places where embers can accumulate. So again, the Institute of Business and Home Safety, this is their ignition resistant construction demonstration, one that they did, I want to say just a couple of years ago. So left side, you know, traditional wood siding, wood decking, wood mulch, or bark mulch, I should say. And then on the right side, I want to say it was gravel around. It was that hardy plank or a fiber cement siding. They had same embers, same ember storm, right, is being tossed at this structure, but you can see what ignited and what did not. And this is a great place to go. This is one of the links that we'll share is because they have a lot of great resources like this. So again, when we come around and we do a home risk assessment, and if you were looking for the what do I need to do part, this is the what do I need to do part, right? This is not the background. This is not the fluff. This is the what do I need to do. If you're building a home, if you're retrofitting a home, if you're making some improvements, these are the things that you can do. Cleaning off the roof, assessing your eaves. Open eaves are more vulnerable than closed eaves. Siding, again, that fiber cement versus wood shingle, which again, we do not see very frequently. Log siding, not a big deal. Big, heavy logs, not a big deal. You know, some of that wood siding where there are gaps and nooks and crannies where embers can accumulate, that's a bigger deal. Windows, again, we don't see single pane, no screens unless it's an old cabin that you inherited and you're not interested in upgrading because you appreciate the historic value of your cabin. I get that. Mulch, again, rock mulch versus bark, wood chips, and then the decking, choosing those materials wisely. So this guide is another link that we'll put in the chat, or sorry, not the chat, but in the recording. This is a recent, it came from Living with Fire out in Tahoe. It's a new retrofit guide. So you can see, I put the contents in here. Defensible space, your roof edges, your rain gutters, your vents, your siding, like point by point, what you can go through and take a look at. So they're giving the recommendations. Why is this more vulnerable than this? They have found, again, these scientists who are literally counting the embers that go through metal screening of different sizes. 1/4 inch, too big, too many large embers get in there. 1/8 inch is just right. 1/16 inch, too small for ventilation, right? So that 1/8 inch metal screening is what is being recommended to cover any opening, because those are the points of vulnerability. It might be where that flicker, like pecked a hole in your siding. It might be where I've done home assessments where, you see where birds have poked holes through the screening, and just looking around and making sure that those have been fixed, repaired. These little places where the embers can accumulate. I wish I could say, let's stop for questions. All right, so then we've got this structure, right? We've got our ignition resistant construction. We've patched things, caulked things, sealed the cracks. And now we're looking at the zones, those home ignition zones. So zone, whatever, there are multiple names for these zones, 0 to 30, including that 0 to 5 foot non-combustible perimeter. So what do you have in that perimeter? Stone, gravel, irrigated dirt, that soil, something that's not going to burn. And then out to 30 foot, that lean, clean, and green buffer, few trees, broadleaf. Remove any big branches that are touching or overhanging your house. Part of that's because we know they're going to drop needles. We know that's going to accumulate in the gutters. We know it's going to accumulate in the complex roof systems. And nobody likes to get up on their roof and clean it more often than they have to. So just trimming off those branches so they're not overhanging or touching your house. Pruning your branches at least 6 to 10 feet up. If you've got a pole saw, if you've got a hand saw, there's a lot you can do just getting started by removing the ladder fuels. And then if you've got a firewood pile, now's a good time to start using the wood pile that I usually have next to my house during the winter months, and then it moves away from my house during the summer months, keeping that wood pile away, because obviously that is dry, it is receptive, and that firewood pile would start your home on fire if ignited. And then again, we've got that space, that 30 to 100 feet, where we're still pruning trees, leaving distance between clusters of trees, using some thoughtful landscaping techniques, paths, irrigation, ponds, whatever it is that you like, to break up the continuity of fuels out there. And then if you've got 100 foot, 200 foot, to just keep doing sort of more of the same. So these are local examples. This is out by Martin City, Glacier Hills. This is one of our spark plugs, one of our neighborhood ambassadors who got his whole neighborhood on board, and everybody, they hired a contractor. He did all the work in the neighborhood. They widened their roads, they replaced their signs, they identified water sources. And so this is an example of hardy plank siding, clean roof, wood, concrete, short irrigated grass, rock around the perimeter. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong screen. Rock around the perimeter. And it reminds me of one of the things Jack Cohen did say when he was doing home assessment training a couple years back. He said a lot of the homes that are left standing in these post-fire investigations have for sale signs in the front, which you're like, why would that, how does that make sense? Oh, because what do people do when you're selling your house? You clean it up, don't you? Yeah, you get everything spiffed up because you want to sell your house. You want to leave a good impression. You want people to come and say, yes, that's a beautiful home. I would like that home. So yeah, it is cleaned, it is raked, it is mowed, everything is tidy. So that's kind of one of the take homes was, you know, doesn't necessarily have to be a lot of work. It just needs to be really tidy. Interesting observation. So we also, this is a home assessment we did. Obviously, I really liked these, so I took pictures of them. I want to say this was west of town, out towards Ashley Lake somewhere. Relatively new construction. Again, roof, enclosed eaves, vents looked good. Log siding, heavy log, not a big deal in regards to fire, as long as it's sealed, maintained, not peeling and cracked. You know, if you have a historic log cabin, that's a different story, right? If it hasn't been maintained, if it's not in good repair, that's a different situation. A lot of concrete, stonework. They were really thoughtful in their irrigation plan. I'd love to go back and see it. This has been a few years. So some of their plantings, how successful were they? They were really doing the native plants, and they did a bunch of thinning out and around it. And I'd be really interested in seeing what it looks like now. This was pretty fresh. A lot of people who want home assessments, sometimes I think they want us to see what a good job they've done. So, which is great, which is great. It was very thoughtful. They were very intentional about what they were doing. Good Creek. So this is an older home out around Good Creek. I think he had 10 or 20 acres, done a lot of work in the home ignition zone. Again, stone work, stone patios, hardy plank, fiber cement, siding, very clean, short grass. I am sort of recognizing response capacities, recognizing what happens in an evacuation setting. Sometimes if you have done enough work, and maybe the expectation is that you evacuate early, and maybe you're loaded up and you go, but there's a tree across the road and you didn't bring your chainsaw, or it's not starting and now you have to turn around and go back. At least you're going back to a place where you know you've done the work, right? Short irrigated grass. Maybe you could just, not suggesting this, I never suggest this. We always recommend evacuating. But if you've done the work, it's a better place to come back to than not having done the work, if that makes sense. So local examples of people who have done the work. Just an example of Firewise, thoughtful landscaping and hardscaping. So again, paths, stone patios, outdoor living spaces, rock work, all obviously materials that are not going to burn. And maybe that's something that you start to incorporate in your new updated landscaping plan. And some people have second homes. They might have a little cabin out there somewhere, out on that Thompson Chain of Lakes area. You know, if you've got a little cabin in the woods somewhere, that's something else to consider. What kind of work, you know, even if it's sort of the minimal, keep the roof clean, clean out the gutters, rake away the needles, cut down some of the trees around there. How do you create that safe space around your little cabin that you love? All right, so a lot of this requires a little bit of spring cleaning. It's the perfect time, a little bit of maintenance, right? So again, it's pulling out the leather gloves, the pruning saw, getting the limbs, cleaning out the gutters, raking, getting on the roof, blowing that, raking it, somehow spiffing it up, spring cleaning. And sometimes it's a little bit more work. Like if your under your deck looks like this, that might take more than an afternoon to clean up. But you can see where all this really dry wood, because we're kind of short on space sometimes. So we end up tucking things here and there. I know last summer I ended up pulling some stuff out from under my porch. But for those reasons, there's a picture of a vent. So just again, checking the vents. What does the screening look like? Could embers intrude and get into the attic here? Do you have birds' nests? Have you had squirrels? You know, this again, really dry vegetation, and in an ember situation, this would ignite pretty quickly. Down here, this is something where obviously it's green right now. But again, late August, this is going to be cured grasses. They're obviously on a slope. They've got a wooden deck. There's an opportunity here to get rid of all that vegetation, get some gravel in there, and even put some screen up to keep any debris from blowing in, and then embers to blow in after that. So some projects require a little bit more time and cash probably. So how do you get started? Well, right now you probably see little columns of smoke all over the place here and there because it's open burning season. Spring open burn season means people are out there doing the work, cleaning up. We had some blowdown again over the last couple of years, actually. So a lot of folks are out there cleaning up, building piles, burning piles, different ways to get the work done. So this is just one short slide on debris burning. So we are mid-March, open burning, no permits are required, but you do need to call Flathead City County Air Quality for the ventilation forecast. And I'll keep cruising here. Spring, May and June, you do need a burn permit. July through September, absolutely no burning. Thank you. It's fire season. Open burning in the fall again. And then in the winter months, there's no burning due to air quality concerns. So just make sure you've got water on site, long-handled tools, enough space. Do this safely. Again, it is the #1 cause of fires that we need to respond to here in the Flathead. Some folks want to know, all right, I've got more than an acre. I've got 30 acres. This is going to be expensive. What do I do? Well, honestly, start with your home, 30 feet, 100 foot. A lot of that can be done, relatively quickly, and then tackle the 30 acres. Because those are different prescriptions. The work you do around your home is different. If you were listening to Rick last week, there are more reasons to manage your fire than just wildfire, manage your forest than just wildfire. So those 30 acres should be managed in a different manner. But we do have different cost share programs potentially available for your area. They're always moving. They're always in different areas, putting money on the ground in sort of a more concentrated fire adapted community manner rather than scattershot. But the Northwest Montana Hazardous Fuels Program is one. The NRCS is another. Industry partners, honestly, you can call Weyerhaeuser, you can call Stoltz. If you've got acres to treat, then that, like the merchantable wood, comes off, and that can offset the cost of your project. So there are different ways to get this kind of work done. If you're looking for guidance, again, call those foresters. DNRC, we have forestry assistants. We have, so I'm a forestry assistant specialist. But there are service foresters who are out there answering these calls. I've got bugs, my trees are dying, the needles, what's this bushy thing? Like they are there to answer questions about your forest. And if you have, that 30, 50, 100 acres and you're looking for a management plan, they can help with that. Education, right? We're here for a reason. We're here because we're interested in not just fire, forest, pests, and disease. We're interested in how to manage our land. So there are a lot of these opportunities available. The Conservation District does a great job of hosting and recording and posting for later viewing these workshops. And tomorrow night, so this is the Lake County Conservation District, our DNRC entomologist, Amy Gannon, is going to once again cover insects and diseases of Northwest Montana forests. So again, a lot of opportunities for education on forests and fire. We're going to skip questions. We're going to cruise through the rest of this. When you're managing your property, I encourage you to think about access, driveways, widths. When it's your worst day and you need somebody to respond, make sure that your driveway is wide enough and make sure that they can see your address. When we're talking about fire, we're also talking about having an evacuation plan, having made that phone call to your insurance agent now, getting their recommendations on what they would require for some sort of home inventory. If your home is lost, they can help you through that process. Having a family emergency plan. Where are you going to go? What are you going to bring with you? Again, all of these, the emergency kit, the go bag, what are the sentimental items that you would want to take with you in an evacuation setting? What is valuable to you? Think about this ahead of time. I was listening, there's a podcast called Fireline that just came out. And the guy was talking about you cannot come up with a plan and implement the plan at the same time, right? So right now is a really good time it's relatively quiet. It's going to be snowy this weekend, cup of coffee on a Saturday morning and a notebook, you can do a lot. So sort of walking around the house, and what are those like most valuable books, baby books, photos, grandma's, whatever that you would hate to lose, that you would want to pack up and go, and have a list to guide you on that really bad day. None of us think clearly on a really bad day. Be aware of conditions, right? So again, fire season here, July, August, around there. Is it a red flag day? What are the conditions out there in the forest? And then there's the whole prevention aspect. Again, evacuation. Are you ready to evacuate not just you, but your pets, your stock, your children, your grandma if she lives with you, the medications, the prescriptions, all of those things, right? People want to think this is really easy, but it actually, there's a lot to think about. So I'm just putting up here these as place markers. This obviously says Fire Safe Marin County. This is California. California does fire. So often if I'm looking for resources to share, honestly, I go to California. A lot of it can be applied to our situation. Locally, the DNRC, we've got an interactive wildland fire map. Obviously, this is from a few years ago when we had the Howe Ridge fire. But you can go here. It looks like there's some moisture coming in from the south, but it shows you this was, what was it, August, a big lightning bust. We had a bunch of fires. And so there are websites where you can go and see fire progress, what's happening, where's the smoke coming from. You can go to InsaWeb. InsaWeb is another place, Howe Ridge Fire. I just left this one up there because a lot of people know about it. Every day you're going to get an update. What are the closures? What happened? What are the updates? You want to know what's going on with our local fires? This is a place to go. Smoke and air quality, also a huge concern, also something to pay attention to. So Flathead City County Health Department links to air quality. And really, this is just wrapping up the whole fire adapted community concept, right? So we are over here, we're supporting healthy forests, land management across boundaries. We are here looking at how we can better prepare our homes. Let's see, we are aware of where our local fire department is, what their staffing and capacity is. We may volunteer with our local fire departments. We might own a business. Are we thinking about our business and how we can become more fire adapted? So really it's recognizing and it's that awareness that we are choosing to live and build and play in these fire dependent forests of Northwest Montana. And there's a group of us, a lot of us, who are working together to create these fire adapted communities and resilient landscapes. So again, I hope this is just the beginning of a conversation. I hope that you will call me. I hope that you will check out Fire Safe Flathead. Again, a lot of links, a lot of resources here can be shared at a later date. And then I want you to just think about which one of these homes is yours, right? Because I look at this home on the left and I think these people, they know what the home ignition zone is. They know that their firewood pile should be 30 feet away from their home. They've got their ignition resistant construction. They've got their evacuation list taped to the inside of their kitchen cupboard. Like they know what a red flag warning is. They're making sure that they're not dragging their trailer chains when they go boating this weekend. Like there's a mindset that comes along with creating and building fire adapted communities. So I encourage you to be this guy over here on the left, this family. And again, just give a call if you've got questions. Otherwise, I think that's it. Do we have questions? I feel like that was a whirlwind.
That was great, Allie. Thank you so much. And we have had a couple of questions come in the Q&A box. So if you're ready, I'll read those out to you and you can go ahead and answer them live.
Sure.
Okay. We had a question from Dorothy come in saying, has Flathead County or areas of Montana adapted new residential business codes to enforce or encourage ignition resistant construction in the wildland-urban interface areas?
No, we'd have to follow up on that one, honestly. We would have to follow up on that. There are building codes, but it's up, I want to say it's up to the counties to adopt those building codes. And obviously we live where we live, and those codes are essentially considered best management practices, I think. So there are recommendations, but there are no, I shouldn't say that because I don't know for sure. That may have changed over the past few years since. Sorry, Dorothy, we're going to have to follow up on that one. Yeah, but we are not strong on codes, especially in the wildland-urban interface. County, mm-mm.
Yep, seems like that's the way it goes, isn't it?
It is. And it's a double-edged sword, right? People move to here because they don't want that regulation code. And at the same time, you know, some other people recognize like, well, it would be nice to have some guidance and it would be nice to have some teeth, you know, to get some of this work done.
For sure. All right, we had another question come in from Stan that says, are there any permanent fireproof coverings for wood decks?
Like a permanent, I don't think anything is permanent. A permanent covering, like a something you would apply, I think is what he's referring to.
Yeah, it might be, I know I've seen those decks before where people paint on or roll on that. I don't know quite what the material is, but that might be something. Do you know?
I do, only because I've looked into this stuff, and every time you start digging, it's like, oh, wow, great idea. Yes, we can coat this. And then there has been the follow-up review and the recall of said product, and the people who have had it on for years and decided, you know what, this is not working. And I haven't really kept up on the development of those products. But again, I don't know if Stan, can we follow up? Because not at the top of my head. Because that would be, you know, honestly, Institute of Business and Home Safety, they've got informational sheets on decks, on coverings. There are conversations going on, Fine Home Building, different places where I get this information. And some of it's like the real sciencey stuff where they're testing. I'm sorry, I'm like 0 for 2 right now.
Well, we'll follow up and we'll try to get some of that information and some of the links to those websites put on once we upload the video to our website, so that maybe we can at least point folks in the right direction to answer some of these trickier questions.
Yeah, a lot of that's because things change. And like I said, you're really optimistic when a product comes out and then you find out that it's not what they were saying it would be. But so yeah, some of this Jack Cohen research, when I took his home assessment training, it had more to do with, you know, honestly, condition, what's on it. So do you have like one of those jute rugs? Do you have furniture? And during a fire situation, that can be pitched pretty easily. It had to do with the spacing of the actual boards, you know, the actual deck. And closer spacing allowed for needles and leaves to accumulate and also for embers to accumulate. Wider spacing allowed those things to perhaps drop through. And then the boards were further apart, just a slight bit further apart. And so the embers were not accumulating there. It also, he has a lot on attachments. So whatever is attaching the deck to the home, that there's some sort of metal, there's some sort of break. I mean, there's some real, like if you're into building and construction and you're looking at that, there's some research out there to lean on. Don't take my word in this moment, because I would go follow some of those articles that can guide you through that. Pretty descriptive and schematic with their advice.
Ellie, I have kind of a related question. You had mentioned hardy plank siding as a good, like, fire resistant option as a building material for your home. I often think of wood as being like a sustainable choice, like it's a renewable resource, relatively non-toxic, that sort of thing. Are you aware of any products out there that are like sustainable, more like eco-friendly materials that are also fire resistant?
Samantha.
I don't mean to stump you. I'm just genuinely curious if there's
No,
anything out there.
I mean, honestly, I have wood siding on my house and I live, half a mile from you out in the
Right.
Wildland-Urban interface on Foothill Road. And I want to do the same. Like, I don't necessarily want hardy plank. I would like wood siding. I like wood siding, but I also know that I'm making decisions to, like, my landscaping considerations. Like, I'm not going to have any vegetation right there adjacent to my house. And I will have the recommended, like, foundation, like at least 6 to 8 inches. And I'm not going to have any wood or any mulch around my house, right? So how is that wood going to ignite, right? Like, I think you can have wood siding. It just needs to be in good shape. It needs to be caulked, like the little cracks and crevices that we were talking about. It just needs to be like in good shape, which takes maintenance, and nobody likes maintenance. So, yeah, again, double-edged. But a lot of this has to do with being just, yeah, clean and good repair. The width might matter as well, like, and the material, like what kind of wood. Is it cedar? Again, that's a really volatile option versus something else, fir larch or whatever.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we've had a couple of questions come in regarding controlled burns and how prescribed burns and controlled burns are used in the Flathead for mitigation, and sort of just, what the current thought is on those. So can you talk to that a little bit?
So prescribed fire on whose ground are we talking about?
I think the questions are just referring in general. So, maybe if you want to quickly touch on how agencies use prescribed fire on public lands, and then maybe briefly touch on private property owner options.
Okay. You're talking to somebody who is a big supporter of prescribed fire. Based on some of the research that's gone on, talking about, yes, mitigation, fuels reduction can replace some of that disturbance, right? But not all of it. So a lot of it, you might do some mechanical thinning, you might do some treatment, and then, like, being able to run some prescribed fire through there, so at a lower intensity, takes care of some of those, that thick duff, that accumulation. And so there are benefits to that. Again, I work for the state. I don't speak for the forest at all. The forest has more latitude to do prescribed fire, right? That is something that they do. They do fuels reduction. They do prescribed fire, and they do it with ecology and fire ecology and forest ecology in mind. And they have a very thoughtful planning process. They have windows that open, like parameters that are very strict, has to do with air quality, fuel moisture, when the next system of precipitation is going to come in on the backside so they can control that prescribed fire. The state lands do less prescribed fire. They do more activity fuels, preparing sites. So if you're not familiar, state trust lands are set aside. Those are the blue squares when you open up your map. And they are set aside to generate funds for the school trust. Generally speaking, there's more to it than that. So we are here to grow trees. So any prescribed fire that happens on state trust lands is often done to prep a site, right? That we just finished doing a timber harvest. We're going to prep the site for the next generation of trees. So they're different agencies have different missions and different ways to achieve those missions. That said, I was just on a prescribed fire call today because we'd like to do more of this like cross-boundary coordination, you know, where we can identify areas of priority for prescribed fire and do more work together. And there are places where it would make sense to do it on private ground as well, or fish wildlife parks, or Lone Pine State Park, or these are ideas, places where people have wanted to implement more prescribed fire, because there are benefits to it, and it happens really well in a lot of places. But if anybody's interested in doing prescribed fire on private grounds, it's hard because of liability issues. Honestly, contractors don't want to light broadcast burns. State, federal employees cannot light fire on private ground. I would say private landowners who do that are, you know, they're burning off their ditches, they're burning off their fields. They've done it for generations. They're pretty good at it. So yes, it can be done, but it comes with risks, I would say. I don't know if that was helpful or if that was just me thinking out loud.
No, I think that made sense to me. I think that definitely reflects a lot of what we see around the Flathead Valley, especially this time of year. So, okay. And we had another question came in that is a bit similar to a question that I have, which ties back to Rick's presentation from last week. So this question is, our house is on a ridge and there is a small forest below coming up the hill. The previous owner planted a row of juniper bushes 30 feet from the house to act as a fire break as it comes up a hill. Is this a good idea?
No. No, I don't think juniper is ever considered a fire break. Juniper is honestly one of the most volatile, right? Like when we talk about the plants not to have, juniper is one of them. And a lot of it's like, if you were to go into that juniper bush and you were to dig in there, there'd be a lot of dead material, really dry, red needled. They have that sort of flaky bark. They're really volatile plants. So if I had a place that was positioned on a ridge and I had 30 feet down, I would want to keep that pretty open. You know, again, because when you're looking at fire and how it moves up slope and how it's going to move right towards your home, and maybe you've got a deck or, you know, I imagine, I would just kind of keep that area with as little vegetation as possible, perhaps, at least short, you know?
Now, last week, Rick talked about how some of our greener deciduous shrubs can be planted in clumps to help sort of filter or capture those sparks. Is there a better option
Than juniper?
Yeah.
You know, it's funny because I followed up with Rick. Rick and I used to work together pretty closely and drive around doing assessments. I do home assessments. He would talk about the forest or surrounding the home. And I remember having a conversation with one day at like, I really feel like if we could plant high moisture vegetation around the home, like it might provide a buffer, and it might be, I've never ever seen any other recommendation. I've never seen any research until last week when he shared that from Australia. So I don't have recommendations right now because I am just following up on that. Because I was, you know, we talked about lilac bushes, but they get huge, right? They're super tall, probably not a great idea. But yeah, like what are some of those high moisture, you know, that you could sort of strategically plant in your landscape plan that would not be vulnerable or flammable or, you know, put your home at risk? I don't have a good answer because I'm following up on that one because I like the idea. You know, nobody wants a devoid of any vegetation. So, you know, not only plant something that is not flammable, but, you know, wow, wouldn't it be amazing if we could plant something that would actually help protect our place?
For sure.
But anything is going to take irrigation. It's going to take like consistent water. It's going to take, you know, and anything would. Yeah. And in fire situations, it's often drought conditions, it's super dry. And then when the fire comes, the power goes out. So unless you've got a generator to keep the water going, to keep the sprinklers, wetting things down, to keep that area wet, then, that's just another something to think about.
Yeah. All right, well, we have two more questions and they're about a similar topic, and that is how to schedule someone to come out and look at your property. And one question is with regards to Lake County. So I was wondering if maybe you could flip back through your PowerPoint. I'm pretty sure I saw a slide you had with some contact information on it for a variety of folks.
Yeah, so this is me, forestry assistants. Anybody can call me and I can, sort of get you in touch with the right person depending on where you are. Home assessments, again, Ernie, he's got an office just down the hall from me, and he is definitely doing home assessments right here in the Flathead. So 751-2270. Lake County, I do not have, it depends on where you live. Like if you live down the Swan, there's a Swan Valley Connections. They often have cost share funding to help with the fuels reduction. And then there's also a service forester, Jack White, who works down the Swan, and he would be available to do something like that. But if you're over in the Polson area or south that way, then Sean Morgan is the service forester down there.
Okay.
So depending on where they live, I know I could flip back through here. It's not that far. It's pretty. There you go. So service foresters can also help with that.
Great.
So yeah, I guess that's great. That's a great way to end, honestly, is just, it seems like a lot to do. And sometimes I feel bad leaving people with like this long list of things to do, like prepare your evacuation and call your insurance agent and complete that home inventory and get out there and clean your gutters and clean off your roof and cut down those trees and prune those branches and burn that pile and replace that sign and, talk to your neighbors. But it's never done. It is something that we work on continually through the years. It's just, again, often I'm like pulling out my handsaw here. It's like, it's just getting started, right? It's just getting started, knowing that you're not alone, that we are all up against, long lists of things to do and not enough time to do it in. So, give us a call your neighbors. Honestly, this time of year, sometimes that's what I do. I've got a dead tree. I call a friend. He cuts the tree down. We limb it up. We burn a pile. A lot of this can be done sort of neighbor to neighbor. Who's your friend with the pickup truck and the chainsaw? Let's get started, and then we'll light the fire and we'll fire up a barbecue and we'll hang out for a while. So some of that is, it doesn't need to be formal, a lot of this we just do. Get out there and get it done. Yeah, it's just getting started. You're not alone. Call us.
All right. Well, I think that is a great note to end on, Allie. So thanks for sharing your direct contact information with everyone. And, as a landowner myself, it's good to know that we've got folks to call and chat with and talk through these problems with and get advice from. So we appreciate that. And we really appreciate your time here tonight. It's been great having you on, and your presentations are always great to listen to.
Thanks for hosting, you guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, I see one more question come in. Oh, we had a thank you come in from Wendy. So.
Oh, you're welcome, Wendy. Thank you for being here on a beautiful St. Patty's evening.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I think we'll go ahead and call that for tonight's webinar, but make sure to stick around next week. We have another webinar coming up. So join us same time, same place next week. And as always, the webinars will be posted on our website here in a few days. Takes us a little bit to get those up, but you can find this webinar and all the others and all the additional resources on our website at flatheadcd.org. So with that, everybody, happy St. Patrick's Day and have a great evening.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.